It's springtime, and so naturally, people's thoughts are turning to marriage. Mae West, with whom I'm often compared, is fond of saying that marriage is a great institution, but I'm not sure I'm ready for an institution just yet. The question this spring, actually, though, is whether a great institution, the United States Supreme Court, is ready for marriage. You all will remember the case of Loving against Virginia, perhaps the winner of the competition for the best name ever for a Supreme Court case. In that case, Chief Justice Warren wrote for a unanimous Supreme Court that Virginia's ban on interracial marriage violated the Constitution, in part because the freedom to marry with which it interfered has long been recognized as one of the vital personal rights essential to the orderly pursuit of happiness by free men. And I'd say free women, too. So now we are waiting on tenterhooks, in a sense, to see what the Supreme Court is going to do about two marriage cases in front of it. The Hollingsworth against Perry case, which is a challenge to California's reinstitution of marriage inequality after a decision by the California Supreme Court holding that California has to allow all couples to marry. And the second case, United States against Windsor, a case in which I've been involved, which involves the constitutionality of a federal statute, the Defense of Marriage Act, which is surely a winner in the competition for the most misleading name for a federal statute ever. It will be very interesting to see what Justice Scalia, whom Nan mentioned earlier, as saying nobody could ever vote against the Voting Rights Act because it sounded so good, so that made the Voting Rights Act suspect, does about the Defense of Marriage Act, because who could vote against a defense of marriage? I'm still trying to figure out what the act is defending marriage against, and I haven't yet done that. But while we're waiting for the Supreme Court to rule, I think it's important for us to recognize something else, which is that it takes much more than a celebrated judicial decision to realize our constitutional values. Loving was the end of a sustained assault on racial discrimination, and almost all of the troops in that campaign were not Supreme Court justices. They were ordinary Americans who were extraordinary Americans. People like Robert Moses and Fannie Lou Hamer, like John Lewis and Viola Liuzzo, and like Mildred and Richard Loving. Loving didn't create change in American hearts and minds. It reflected change that was already there. Now, in the past quarter century, we've moved from the era of Bowers against Hardwick, a case in which the Chief Justice of the United States felt free to compare the sexual intimacy of gay people to murder, and not in a complimentary way, to an era in which a majority of Americans support legal recognition for gay families. We've moved in roughly a generation from a nation in which no state provided legal recognition to same-sex couples to one in which 2 in 5 Americans live in states that do. And without that change on the ground, the Supreme Court would not even be considering protections for same-sex couples. Now, how did that change occur? Well, after we were at the Supreme Court to argue United States against Windsor this year, we came down the steps of the court, and I hope for all of you who are lawyers, you get the opportunity one day to come out of the Supreme Court with your client and have hundreds of people screaming your client's name. It's an experience like no other. But when we came down the steps and we had the little press conference afterwards, somebody asked Edie Windsor at the press conference, what made the change? Why are things so different today? And what Edie said is, it's because we came out. It's because we came out. We moved, as Donald Rumsfeld would put it, from being unknown knowns, that is, the ones they don't know, to being known knowns, that is, people who know that they know gay people. And they know gay people, and they respect gay people, they value gay people, and they love gay people. Now, you all know there's an old joke about a conservative is a liberal who's just been mugged, and a liberal is a conservative who's just been arrested. Well, today's version is a supporter of marriage equality is a politician who just discovered his kid is gay. So what are we waiting for? Well, in the words of another old joke that many of you have heard, you know, this couple, they've been married for 60 years. They go to see their lawyer and they say, we want a divorce. We've been married for 60 years. And the lawyer says to the couple, you've been married for 60 years. Well, we've never gotten along. But you've been together the whole 60 years. Yeah, but we just hate each other. So why now? And they said, well, we've been waiting for the kids to die. And I think the generational change in America shows us that in some sense we're just waiting for a generation to die or to change its minds. So there's a wonderful poem by Marge Percy that I thought about when I was asked to speak today, and it's called The Low Road. It begins by asking, what can they do to you? And initially, the answers are pretty depressing. Although alone you can fight, the message is alone you can't win. But then the poem builds, and I want to end my introductory remarks by reading you the end of the poem, because I think it captures so powerfully why we're here today. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake-dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people, don't worry, they can't give sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four people, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity in your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again and they say no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean, and each day you mean one more. That building tide is what we're here to celebrate today. And now it's time to present the annual Alliance for Justice Champion of Justice Award. This year, there actually are 4 Champions of Justice because we're honoring 4 statewide coalitions that successfully fought for equality in the 2012 elections. It's one of the great stories of electoral success in recent years. These groups from Maine, from Washington, from Minnesota, and Maryland have completely changed the national conversation about same-sex marriage, and they're moving us forward faster than we could possibly have imagined. They have an amazing story to tell, and they have lessons to share. And the Alliance is proud to celebrate their achievements today. They demonstrate a principle that's at the heart of the Alliance's Bolder Advocacy initiative, that lasting change is possible when fearless nonprofit organizations join together with energized citizens and with courageous public officials. The fact that several more states have legalized same-sex marriage since the election, including Minnesota itself, of course, is proof of the momentum that these campaigns have provided. Our final champion of justice comes from the state where sunrise first hits the United States each day, Maine, and it's Mainers United for Marriage, whose campaign ensured that Maine became the first state to approve a citizens' initiative to allow a loving same-sex couple to receive a marriage license. Before we present that award, let's take a look at how Mainers United helped to change hearts and minds across their state.
We have 4 generations of our family sitting around this table. Dottie and I have been together for 59 years now. I flew in the last battle of World War II. I couldn't see how anyone who had been in combat could ever be cruel to anyone ever again. It takes a great deal of bravery to be a lesbian. I'm so proud of Katie and Alex.
We're pretty proud of you.
Oh, good. Marriage is too precious a thing not to share.
I would, in my lifetime, really like to be able to see Katie and Alex get married legally.
This isn't about politics. It's about family and how we as people treat one another.
And now to present the Champion of Justice Award to Mainers United for Marriage, we're honored to welcome a longtime advocate of social and economic justice and a good friend of the Alliance for Justice, Congresswoman Chellie Pingree of the 1st District of Maine.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here from the state of Maine. I want you to know that, in all honesty, I was raised as a Lutheran in Minnesota. And I have learned well to look at all of your shoes. But I'm really proud to be here. And also, thank you to the Alliance for Justice for doing this, and Nan, and all the great people who are part of this organization and are here supporting this organization today, and many of you who supported me in getting to Congress. So we're all back in it together. But really, I'm here to introduce Betsy Smith of Equality of Maine, who's here on behalf of Mainers United for Marriage, the phenomenal coalition of Maine organizations that led a successful marriage equality referendum campaign this past November with really heartwarming ads just like that and an incredible effort. And while I'm here to recognize the entire organization and Betsy is here to accept for them, I want to give Betsy also a personal thank you for her dedication and incredible diligence on this issue and bringing us to that incredible moment. I don't have to tell you, after hearing from the other 3 states and all the work that so many people in this room have done, but this victory means so much to so many, but most importantly to the gay men and women who've had to wait much too long for the state to recognize their committed and loving relationships. It has been so wonderful to watch these couples emerge from the town halls across Maine with their marriage certificates in hand over the past few months. I'm so happy for those families, so proud of our state for finally making the right decision. So grateful to Equality Maine, GLAAD, ACLU of Maine, and all the other coalitions that really made this happen. Like so many places, the journey for marriage equality in Maine was long, and the final push no less Herculean. After a great deal of hard work and a lot of courage, actually in May 6th of 2009, Maine became the first state legislature in the country to pass a marriage equality bill through its legislature, which I'm very proud to say at the time my daughter Hannah was the Speaker of the House, and it was signed by our governor at the time. That initial triumph was unfortunately short-lived when an aggressive outside lobby pushed to repeal the law that fall. We were all devastated and really weren't sure when it would come back and when it could be done again. But undeterred, Equality Maine and its partners only strengthened their efforts with an army of committed volunteers who went back to work. Signature by signature, conversation by conversation, and story by story, as these things have to be won, they did something even more difficult than moving mountains. They moved people's hearts. And in 3 short years, which no one expected they could ever do it so fast, they changed enough minds to make a difference. It's certainly not the last fight we will have to fight in establishing equal rights for all. In many ways, there is so much more work to do now that we've opened this up. For me, as a member of Congress, that means continuing to fight in Congress to repeal the Defense of Marriage Act and to block any efforts to roll back or weaken protections for gay and lesbian Americans. It means working to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act to ensure equal workplace protections, to pass the Every Child Deserves a Family Act to help connect children in need of homes with loving parents. And right now, it means working to ensure that comprehensive immigration reform is truly comprehensive for families of gay and lesbian couples. I look forward to working with Betsy in my state and the incredible coalition and all of you to helping to achieve those important milestones on this journey. Congratulate everyone here who has worked so hard on this, and want to bring up Betsy to thank her and congratulate her and this incredible coalition on their wonderful work. I'm very proud.
Thank you, Chellie. Probably some of you know Chellie as Maine's most progressive member of Congress, but I have to tell you, she is so much more. She is a champion of LGBT equality and has been since her time as a state senator, as Senate president, as president and CEO of Common Cause, and now currently as Maine's District 1 Congresswoman. Chellie also happens to be married to one of the most generous men on earth, and I mention him because Without the support, without Donald Sussman, we may not have won the freedom to marry in Maine. Donald Sussman donated nearly $2 million to our effort to win marriage. So on behalf of Maine's Marriage Coalition, thank you to two of our greatest local heroes, Chellie Pingree and Donald Sussman. We had a panel yesterday, and I talked about why Maine was unique among the 4 states. Unlike my colleagues, who were thrust onto the ballot against their desire because of a legislative action, we determined in 2010 that our only viable path to winning the freedom to marry in the foreseeable future was through a citizens' initiative. Because the citizens took marriage directly to the voters, Maine is the first and only state to win the freedom to marry without legislative or court approval. Two of the most important components of our campaign were the extensive research we did on voters conflicted on marriage and our field persuasion program that resulted in over 250,000 one-on-one conversations. We began research about 18 months out from Election Day. Together with the research from Freedom to Marry, HRC, Third Way, and others, we learned about conflicted voters, that to move them from civil unions to marriage, we had to stop talking about fairness and equality and start talking about love and commitment. Mainers overwhelmingly support fairness and equality for LGBT couples, i.e. rights and protections, which they believe can be attained through civil unions or domestic partnerships. So we had to connect with them on a very different level. This research led to a better understanding of how to talk to Mainers through our one-on-one conversations. We met voters where they were and brought them on a journey from opposing marriage to supporting it. We did this by engaging in a conversation that had them discuss their values around marriage, why marriage mattered to them. What does marriage mean in context of their families, of school, church, and community? And also, what does it mean for them to have this and deny it to their neighbors? We also had people verbalize their opposition to marriage for same-sex couples. When they did that, some people realized that they didn't really have very many good reasons to oppose marriage. It was simply a position that they always had held. Some people had good reasons, i.e. religious upbringing, tradition, etc., but began to understand marriage for same-sex couples differently than they had before. In fact, began to understand that same-sex couples value marriage in the same way they value marriage. I'd like to share a story of one of these people, one of the 250,000, with whom we had a conversation. This was an email I received in early 2012 from someone that I don't know. A couple of months ago, I received an unsolicited phone call at home from an Equality Maine volunteer who asked me my opinion on a number of issues, which led to a discussion of gay marriage. I told the caller I considered myself an independent, conservative Catholic. And we had a nice, nearly half-hour-long discussion, an honest discussion that was mutually respectful and just, well, really nice. I wish I knew the caller's name because I know it was an important call to her. I want you to know my discussion with your caller was meaningful to me, incredibly meaningful, in fact. I am friends with, work with, and know many LGBT people, some in my own family, but I did not believe in gay marriage. My strong Catholic upbringing helped form my opinions. But, I now will vote for gay marriage in Maine. I think I'm writing this for this reason. So you can tell your phone volunteers that their calls are important, that their attitude and behavior during the calls can change hearts and help change minds, that their listening is as important as their talking. It was in my case, that they make a difference. I wish I knew the name, excuse me. I wish I knew the name of the Equality Maine caller I spoke to the night she called. I'd want her to know she had an impact and helped sway a vote. She really did. I still consider myself an independent conservative, but I am voting for gay marriage in Maine in November. Our path to success was having this experience over and over, not with people completely opposed to marriage, but with middle, conflicted, independent-leaning, often Catholic Mainers who support fairness and equality for LGBT people, but did not support marriage. For everyone in this room who donated money or helped in any way to winning the freedom to marry in Maine, thank you, because you made this story happen. You made this story come true. And on behalf of Maine's Marriage Coalition, thank you to the Alliance for Justice, not just for this recognition, but for the meaningful advocacy that we all benefit from. Thank you very much.